It's been a few days now since we've downloaded Ghost of Tushima, and we're ready to tell you our initial thoughts. So, first off, the game looks fantastic. There might be around 50 hours of gameplay, but we're sure a lot of folks are going to spend an extra 20 in photo mode, and we wouldn't blame them. The game is visually stunning and uses contrasting colors to make the environment look magical. Personally, I'm in love with the yellow trees and get distracted every time I ride through them. And on the topic of distractions, it's hard not to stray from the main path sometimes, as you pass by interesting spots, side missions, or get approached by a bird or a fox that wants to lead you elsewhere. It's not always worth it though, as some side missions are ridiculously easy, or the bird sometimes disappears while you're following it. Hello, birdie. Where'd he go? But even then, I couldn't really be mad, because the exploration itself was really enjoyable. You can choose to experience the game in several modes, and I chose Japanese with English subtitles, which is cool because the Japanese voice acting is great, but it is quite clear that the characters' lips are synced in English, which is a shame. Also, as cool as the black and white version is, it almost feels like a waste to select it because of how well the game used colors. Fighting mechanics are enjoyable. There's a lot of options for fighting and trying out cool things. As a notoriously bad parry person, I was worried I wouldn't like the combat, but I was very glad to be proven very wrong. Aside from parrying, you can dodge and counter attacks pretty effectively and have long distance options later on. In other words, when it comes to fighting, there's a lot of fun to be had, tactics to explore, and skill trees to fill. Depending on what kind of player you are, you can spend your time dodging and spamming square, or you can take your time to strategically choose between stances and whip out some fancy moves. The game also does a good job at explaining combat mechanics. I'm not a huge fan of tutorials, but this game taught us swordplay and the way of the samurai at the same time in this location, which just made it feel really epic. And that's something I had to include in this video, because I actually listened to the tutorial instead of skipping through and figuring it out for myself later. I personally really appreciate games that integrate tutorials in a way that doesn't mess with the immersion. In terms of difficulty, I played the game on medium, and so far I haven't come across any big bosses or areas that I'm really stuck on. Most areas I had a harder time getting through were mostly those where I insisted on barging in instead of embracing the assassin within. One-on-one enemies are very doable, but when they come at you in a swarm, it can get pretty intense. Stealth is a big part of the game, and while you can choose to be honorable and not assassinate at times, choosing not to will often trigger a lot of enemies. Aside from not getting ganged up on, stealth is a lot of fun, even if the game does a good job of reminding you that assassination and sneaking are dishonorable. I did genuinely feel bad every time I stabbed someone in the back, only to be reminded later on that I was straying from the samurai code. Now, we know that our recent dabblings in assassination are going to disappoint our uncle, and we don't mean to be shady, but being honorable is what got you kidnapped in the first place, sir. The story, without spoiling too much, revolves around Jin trying to rescue his kidnapped uncle. It's a simple premise and builds on a concrete goal that is established at the very beginning. It doesn't seem to be our end goal, but we do have to play more to find out. The people you meet as you go are interesting enough to care about, and while the missions so far are relatively similar in that you usually sneak into an enemy camp, save some villagers, and kill some Mongols, I still look forward to what happens next. You do get some dialogue prompts, but so far I haven't enjoyed them as much as I did in The Witcher, where you had more time to decide in which direction the conversation is going, and where there are more dialogue prompts to begin with. The few dialogue prompts I've come across so far have been interesting, but they always pass by really quick, so I don't really have time to decide what I really want answered. All in all, my first impressions are that this game is massive. The map feels huge and stays relatively blank until you pass through certain areas, so there's lots of content to unpack. The scenery is gorgeous and makes you look forward to places you have yet to discover, and the story is compelling enough to make you look forward to what comes next. The only downside I've come across so far is that the camera moves pretty slowly. Games like Dark Souls have a much faster camera, and they have the option to lock on, which does make fighting a little smoother. Especially in situations where you're fighting a whole horde of people, the camera can get in the way sometimes, leaving me to stare at a tree while I get shanked to death. Are you fucking— but that's really our only complaint so far. At this point in time, I would highly recommend the game if you're a fan of open world games like Red Dead Redemption and The Witcher 3, where there's plenty of story, lots to discover, and enough enemies to fight. If these kinds of games aren't really your cup of tea, you're probably not going to be a huge fan of Ghost of Tushima, and that's too bad because, good God, this game is good. Oh, little fox, you're so cute. You're such a cutie, I love you. Okay, no, shh, stop. Okay, maybe I do need to follow him. Such a little cutie. Let me pet you. Let me love you. What happened here? No, fox, come back.